talking about interesting question. Uh, thank you very much, Nadine. It's uh, great to see a full host. And now, you talk about the Robinson settlement. Um, in 1820s, Ireland was in a state of trouble, especially with the white boys. Then there was a lot of uh, arson and damage to property and everything. So, and population was increasing and getting more and more. So the British government decided they have to do something, and they decided that they'd get Catholics to go over to Canada. And why were they looking for Catholics? They were looking for Catholics because they decided that there was too many Protestants going, and there weren't enough what they called live subjects being left in Ireland. Well, they said we're getting the Catholics from the areas that are giving problems. So that they decided that let's see, uh, yeah, yes, you can see there, you can read on whether the disturbances were all around from Rathcormac up to Limerick City, Castleton, or they were got quite by disturbances well. That's when the principal area that there were problems. And um, he was the Secretary for War in the colonies, Henry Bathurst, and he's organised funding to send these Catholic families over to Canada. But in Canada, they wanted to colonise it. They were after Canada was after sort of the states had broken free from England at the time in the 70s, and Canada was afraid that the states would come up and take over, and they wanted people there to defend it, and they wanted it to be colonised. Um, Population of Ireland at that time was around coming up to 8 million, probably in the 1820s. And in Ireland that time, you'd have had in the 2 square miles, you'd have had 500 people. In 2 square miles in Canada, you'd have had one person. Just vastly underpopulated. So that's what they wanted. They wanted to that. Uh, Wilmot Compton, he was the man sat in charge, but he was the undersecretary for the colonies and was very friendly with a few of the landlords here in Ireland. And so they contacted a man by the name of John Beverly Robinson. He was the Attorney General in Canada. He was come over to England to make a report and to tell them how things were going. And he had an older brother, a man by the name of Peter Robinson. And they asked Peter to take charge of this scheme of getting the colonizing Canada. So Peter Robinson, who knew Canada very well, and he was given the job of um, organizing it. And there was a letter that said he wrote, Peter Robinson wrote to Wilbur Houghton, telling him that he would have to arriving in Fermoy. The reason that they picked Fermoy was a big army barracks there, and a man by the name of Richard Hare, who had the title of Lord Ennismore. He was living in Ballyhooly, and Lord Ennismore was a very influential man. He was in the House of Lords, and uh, his father was Lord Listowel, and he was they were both in the House of Lords in England, and he was very influential even with the King in England. And you're familiar with the Crawford Gallery, and you're familiar with the Canova casts that was in the gallery. And he was a man responsible for getting those into Ireland. The Canova casts, well, as you know, they were given to the English by the Pope as a reward for what the English, the treasure that England had taken off Napoleon and sent back to Rome, and they were given to England, and England didn't have any place for them, and at the time, so the Lord Ennismore, he stepped in straight away and said, "We take me up and so the tremendous addition. So he went into, they came into Croy, that was that's McCurtain Street in Croy, which was then called King Street. And there was a printer there, Lindsay's Printing Works, and Peter Robinson and Lord Ennismore went into Lindsay's and got that printed to an immigration to Canada. And this was sent out to all the Catholic churches and posted up in various public places around North Cork, especially. Now, most of the people that time, of course, were Irish speaking, but very few of them could read Irish. Very, very few, because there was nothing printed in Irish. The first Irish dictionary was printed in 1760 by Bishop O'Brien, who was Bishop of Clyde. But there was very little else printed in Irish, and all the articles and newspapers were all English. So people were able to read, and the Peter Robinson himself um, was asked about the education of the people, and he said it was very, very good, surprisingly good. Because that time you had the English with their charity schools and their chapter schools trying to convert all the Irish to Protestantism, and in return, as against that, you had the Irish priests who were setting up schools and organising schools, and there was eight schools. So between the conflict between those was a benefit to the ordinary Irish person, and they were well educated. And when Peter Robinson was asked in the House of Commons Select Committee about the education, he said that they were surprisingly good. He said we're able to read and write, and he said they were able to calculate their rations to a quarter of an ounce. I mean, it's you'd be inclined to think that they wouldn't have been educated. They would just, you were surprised at the standard of education. Um, Now, uh, he um, he was looking for good, steady people, and we have a letter here from uh, William Rickson Beecher. He was married to a sister of Lord Ennismore, and he was a landlord. He was also the landlord down in Cape Clear and down that area. So there was a number of families from Cape Clear came, and he is writing this letter to Peter Robinson. My dear sir, the candidates for immigration. Um, the candidates for immigration are increasing and greatly exceed the number to which you have limited me. If you could give me a greater latitude, it would be desirable. You are naturally anxious to have steady men with families, and it is equally natural that we should wish to get rid of idle, uh, unmarried individuals uh, who seem likely to keep up the present disturbances. But if once possessed of a little property, they would soon change their habits. If therefore we can get 5 or 6 of that description to go as one family and be satisfied with one allowance of ground amongst them, or uh, amongst them all, should you have no objection, you will oblige me by a kind line on this point. It's, I mean, naturally enough, the landlords wanted to get rid of some of the troublesome people, and but and this was in 1823. This was the first lot, and there was a letter as well then from um, in 1823 there was he had room for 600, and there was only 560 applied. So there were two ships went over the Hebe, and the Stakesby went over in 18 from Cove in 1823, and 2 months later they arrived in Canada and they settled around Ottawa. And then he came back. He was working some more in 1824, but it was 1825 before he could organise it. And he came back then, and there's a letter here from Longboat Castle, who was in Moore Park. Um, so, which is Moore Park, the 20th of October, 1824. So, I would have answered your letter immediately on receiving it if I were able. I have for the last fortnight suffered a good deal from a venous attack, which affected my head as well as my body, and rendered me incapable of attending to any sort of business. I am still confined to my room, but I'm glad to say that I am now able to answer your inquiry. The number of families whom I have marked in my list as fit to send to Canada amount actually to 83, consisting of 562 individuals. This is from Longboat Castle, who was in Kilmore. Um, Particularly, um, I shall and next at the end of this a particular statement of the members of each parish. You will see that there are only the average of 7 in each family. They are poor and wretched, and have most of them subsisted by tilling the soil. The oldest of them may be 50 years of age. There was a restriction that 45 was the oldest that they would take, but they did take a few people that were older. All are Roman Catholics, with the exception of one family. I think they are just as happy persons you wish to have in America, and by taking them, you would rid this country of many paupers. So you can see the way the landlords were looking at these things, but and the landlords were also trying to get rid of their tenants. Um, in the two places that sent the most were Mallow and Mitchelson. Mitchelson sent over 200 to Mitchelson, and nearly the same amount from Mallow. Um, Lord Kingston was in Mitchelson. They were anxious. Lord Kingston was going building his castle, which he felt what would be the equivalent of um, millions of pounds in today's terms, and he was wanting to get rid of some of his uh, tenants. Uh, in the first in 1823, Jefferson's and Maradis sent quite a lot, but by the people which are some Kingston's didn't send many. But when they went over in 1823, word came back how good things were. They got 70 acres each, plus an option to buy and another for longer rent and a longer fee. And that thing was, the weather wasn't the best, like they were way colder than what they have been here, but the big thing was that you had no discrimination because they were Catholics. I mean, Canada had Catholic emancipation in the 1770s. That was due to the French connection. The French were very involved in Canada, all the stuff, so they couldn't be discriminated against because of their Catholicism. So, and for the second lot then, in 1825, whereas in 1823, he had trouble filling two ships with 600 people. For 25, he had 50,000 applications. And now in 1823, people were they didn't know what was their part was a trick, they thought it was a trap. In Farry, up near Kildare, they had several applications with Farry, and then a Protestant family applied, and they were said, no, we don't want Protestants. So the Catholics thought it was a trap to and they would so there was only one family went from Kildare out of the Birmingham Bridge, Thomas Strait, in 1823. So people they thought they were asking Peter Robinson about wild animals. What was there were a lot of questions they knew very little about Canada naturally, and it was a big step for them to take. But you can imagine they were deal maybe farming, renting maybe 2 acres or 5 acres, and to get 70 acres, just so when word got back that things were genuine and everything was good, um, 50,000 applications he had. So the second last, first that was just 500, over 560 went. In 1825, there was 9 ships went with 2,024 people in total. And they all left from home. Uh, they went a little bit earlier, and this time the crossing only took a month, which was very lucky. Really, Patron had uh, they had the ships were supplied by the British Navy. They had a soldier aboard each ship. In 1824, the same number that left home arrived in Canada. There was 18 died on the trip. There was 18 born. So now, when they got to Canada that time, they landed in Montreal, and they got to board down um, the lake down to near Kingston, and they settled up in Peterborough. But there were a good few died, and they got AIDS. This is sort of malaria. They weren't used to the climate. When the good few died, and but Peter Robinson was uh, that's the big ship that sailing ships um, yeah.
It looked like an Irish flag.
Yeah, that is one of them.
It says the French.
Yeah, sure, it could be, but yeah, probably,
Couldn't have been.
but it may be, but we don't have any photographs of any of the actual ships. We know the names of them, we know some of the history, but we don't exactly know what they look like. That's why I think it was a sample of what they would have looked like, and it could indeed be an Irish flag.
Just wasn't made at the time.
Downstream. They, when you they settled we settled near Peterborough in Canada. It's about an hour and a half in driving to the northeast of Toronto. Uh, uh, Slackland, I mean, it's not, I mean, I was over there, and you don't, and either none of the factors have anti-roll valves. It's not that bad. But they settled there, and there's, the number of villages formed, like Downeyville, Ennismore, um, uh, um, uh, they're from Trinidad, I mean, a couple of villages formed, and they have what they call the pioneer cemeteries, where um, the first of them were, who don't know where they were buried, and that's Fitzgerald. He was from Liscannor, and you can see there William, yeah, William Fitzgerald. There he is there. Now we know the names of everybody of Galway, which is when I said there might be 3% that we don't know, but I'll explain that in a minute. Um, Rathcormac sent uh, 7 families in 1823 and nobody in 1825. But a lot of people started going over on their own without the without the assistance of travel. They probably paid their way over, and you'll see a lot of families over, a lot of names over that weren't on any ship's list, and they went over. Now, there's you can see it. John Mara or Raw Mara, he left in the Stakes in 1823, and there's a letter, 2 letters that he wrote back uh, in and this is in November of 1823, and he's writing to his brother from Canada, to his brother James in Toronto. My dear James, I take this opportunity of writing you these lines, hoping to find you and family being in as good health as I am at the present. Thanks be to God. We sailed from Cove and Cork on the 8th of July and arrived in Quebec on the 3rd of September. We had a favourable and as pleasant a voyage as ever was performed to this country. From Quebec we came in a steamboat to Montreal, which was 180 miles up the river. The St. Lawrence, by the way, is tidal for 400 miles. But I can give you it's tidal always up there with Toronto. And uh, on the way over up the St. Lawrence River. And from there we came up the country in wagons about 300 miles to a place called Ramsey, where we were encamped and sent out in numbers 6 to 30 as a pilot, with a pilot with each squad to show us our land. And we think it is being good, we take it or not. I got my land on the 12th of November, and as to my judgment, it is as good a land as any in the country. Actually, it wasn't, but anyway. Our superintendent, Mr. Robinson, is behaving as humane and as gentlemanly as any man in this world. He has served us out with beds and blanketing and all kinds of carpenter's tools. They were supplied with all the tools needed they were given a cow, they were given saws and plows and everything that they would want to. A lot of those tools came over from England with the ships brought over by Peter Robinson. Um, uh, and a cow, the heat of every family, yeah, with several other articles which I am not mentioning now. We are here for a few days when a priest came here and gave us communion and mass, but never came since. But expects a priest when we are able to pay him. This is a very good a very good free country. Every man is paid from $8 to $12 a month, and every woman from $3 to $5. Little bit of discrimination that lasts for a long time afterwards. Um, each dollar is currently worth here 5 shillings. I very much enjoyed as you missed the opportunity when we were coming, but I do expect when Mr. Robinson goes to Ireland, I do recommend to you to hold yourself in readiness very early next spring and come here along with him and let the two Callahans and two sisters come forward along with you if they take my advice. And Richard Cotter come along with you and all the friends which you have who have no good living in Ireland, especially Edmund Carey. And I recommend to you if you come to bring such wearables as you can, especially freezers and planners, that is to transport up and linen. And you can bring the iron balloon with you, or with our looms ready and all. Remember me to my dear mother and sister, and give them my best love. Remember me to James Foley and tell him that I am well, and tell him I am as well as he would wish me to be. Remember me to James Shea and Thomas Shea and their wives, and Pat Neal, my mother-in-law, and Edmund Carey's wife. The settlers are here for 2 years, and they're as happy as any people I know at home, and do expect if you come here that you will, that with the assistance of God, I can make all of you, I can make much of all of you, and you will come forward here. Remember me to John Connor and give me his love, and give him my love. No more, but remain your beautiful brother until death. John Marlon. Bring some potatoes, a little fresh butter with you on board. This was part of the journey out. Um, when they did, they were simply, they were fade always out. But they later found that the food that they had, I mean, there was some pudding and things like that. They missed the potatoes and they don't have some of them. So it was cheese and there was pork and that, and they didn't. Uh, they wanted to have, and there was some other that a lot of these were, a lot of people were, a lot of children on board. Um, let the Queen's friends know, let Tim Queen's friends know that he is in good health as ever, and he will, and that as ever he was at home. Thanks be to God. Mr. James Weller, County Cork. Now, writes again in 1824 on the November the 10th. My dear brother James, I avail myself of this favourable opportunity of writing to you to inform you that we are all well at present. Thank God for it, and we hope that ye will find you in good health. Dear brother, I am sorry to inform you that I was unfortunate with respect to getting a bad lay of the land. I have got a better one now, and I think I will do well upon it. Um, I must give God thanks for that, whoever demanded change land. If it had not been for him, I would not have had such a good lot of land. I hope, brother, if there is a favourable opportunity to come here in the next spring, I hope you will be making preparations to come, for I hope you will not neglect us. I think you ought to come whether your wife comes or not. No. And bring the two boys along with you. You need not be afraid of Mr. Robinson, for he will perform to you all that he will promise and more, for he has done so for us, and I hope he will do so for you. I hope you will be providing as many body clothes as possible for you, and you will find it very dear here, it's something to bring your body coats and your overcoats. Um, you need not mind much about bringing blankets with you, but they are a good supply here for Mr. Robinson. So, I mean, they were supplied with all the tools to build the house. They had all the lumber for the house. They had all the tools, and for the first 12 months, they were supplied rations. So there was great food. So, I mean, because it was 12 months for their own crops of potatoes and corn and that, but also they were supplied with everything. You may bring 2 pots with you, something large, for you cannot do without them. We advise you to bring with you some oils and tackling for a room, but I will be very much wanting here. You need not be afraid to come, for your youngest boy will receive a man's rations. You may ask Mr. Robinson to get into the ship with Dr. Hamilton. Give my regards to Edward Carroll. If you take my advice, you will come here to be out of poverty and empty misery. Um, yeah, if you yeah, his girls, that's exactly what uh, and his girls will get good money and service here. You will let him know that although I got the place that I was in rent free, I would not go home to it. That's mean if you got the place home rent free, you would not go home to it. Yeah, brother, I'm very thankful to you and that my own mother did not stop me from coming to this country. And I hope you will give her my blessing, whether she be dead or alive, you wouldn't have been any use, whether she be dead or alive. Um, you may let her know that we have, again, since we came out here, there were two children and born after they came out, and we call her Betty. We have one cow and a heifer coming in, 2 years old. Those boilings I mentioned to you to bring you need not mind them, but my leg is getting better now. You should go on, Mr. Robertson. You need not mind about bringing anything on board except a little oatmeal for you to take a little drink on the passage. You may bring a few potatoes and keep them for the passage. And that's what vinegar, we need not mind anything about that. But we have pork every Sunday and then we're here on the passage. You may either bring stockings or yarn with you to make the beard, but you will find them very useful here. Give my respects to all inquiring friends, and I remain your affectionate brother, John. Now, um, the activist in Canada, he has an order these letters. He's a professor Chadwick Miller describes the series of letters as letters by government assisted immigrants to Upper Canada. I believe maybe that through the Peter Robinson that they organise families over to write and collectively send those back to their relatives in Ireland because definitely uh, you know we won't get back very quickly about how well they were doing and they had and you can see there John O'Mara was speaking. He said that Tim Quinn was another man who went out. He said that Tim Quinn was doing well. That's the type of house that are built in Canada, little log cabins and they're just rough uh, rough uh, sawn timbers and put up together and a little fire as winters were cold. Um, you know, speaking about the pioneer cemeteries and um, there's the cemetery in a village called Douro, and in Douro they have put that you see the little green shamrock there on it. Any of the headstones that they for original Robinson settlers, they put a little green shamrock on it. Now that shamrock isn't permanent; it'll wash off. Um, and it's Daniel O'Leary. Um, Leahy is a very strong name around that area too. The Lees, some of them came from Connacht, some of them from Richardson, and some from Ballyhooly. Um, now, um, I didn't make a very good job of that. I missed out the top of the photograph, but anyway, um, it is there's tremendous information on these. Sometimes it tells you, it might think say, there's a Joseph Cabinet out of Pomoi. We saw over there, William Fitzgerald and Edward Fitzcarroll, so there's tremendous information. But this very, more, more, which more, there's a lot of moors around Kilworth, Ballygilbert, Richardson, South Tip, and it's another form of matter. But on the top of that headstone, the name is written Moore, and that is MAWHER, and this is native of Talbot, County Cork. That's Kilworth. If you go to North Cork, you'll hear people referring to Kilworth and Glanworth in the local dialect. It was actually Kilworth and Glanworth, and there it was. I mean, it took a while to figure out where that was, but that fact was Kilworth. No, that's the chap with the name of Thomas Armstrong. He went over in 1825. We have photographs of him going to 18. They went in 1823, 1825. We have photographs of some of the people that went, because they lived up to that until the cameras came into being in the 1860s. And you would see him there, Thomas Armstrong. There is this man, he's John O'Grady. He went over as well in 1825, but from Mallow, but he went as Joanna O'Grady. He must, you see, when there was 50,000 applied, and of course some people decided not to go, and they swapped their tickets for maybe the first cousin or someone else that wanted to go. And so this family went over, and John O'Grady was dressing the girl going over so the ticket was there, and he moved us. So now there's a lot of stuff written about it in Canada. The people are talking about very good work on what they of the journey over, shall we say, how they assembled in Cork. What they did was Peter Robinson organised them together in Cork. I mean, they came from as far away as in parts of County Clare. There was one family from Kilkenny, one family from Wicklow. But they came to Cork, and they went from Cork to Cove by boat. The private boats, great boats were going down, and got on the ships there. And Peter wrote a great boat. We know which ship each of them went. We know as you saw there with the we know the names of them all and their ages. Now, you can see here John Armstrong was 32, Mary and Samuel were 15 and 16. They were probably servants. They were probably well down from us, because they'd be too young to be the children of Elizabeth and John, and there was Samuel, can't give me a second name now, had a plot near Armstrong's, so that was probably the man that went over with them. But there's tremendous information. Yeah, and then you can see that, like we saw that O'Mara had there was one, two, three, four, five more children born in Canada. Um, the largest family they went over was 13, and that, now there's another um, Peter Robinson set up by Carol Bennett. Um, that gives all the names of them and their ages. You know, that was written in the late 80s, and it's a great source for um, the graveyards. They have done a lot of work now on the stay in a small township, um, and they've done a lot of work on all the graveyards. Um, there's tremendous stuff written about them in Canada and about the graveyards, about various villages, and about various families. You have some families even that would have a whole book on their own. The families, of course, intermarried because there was no one else there at the start, really, too. Now, the Mohors, by the way, that we saw, they came over just after the 1825, because the British government, it cost 40,000 to to organise it. And they said that's too dear, we're not doing it anymore. And they said they're going over now themselves um, on their own. Now, they were still getting the land over for little nothing anyway, because they wanted to colonize. They needed people over there. So, I mean, there was far more people going to Canada than to the States that time. Way, way more. And they were uh, getting along. Um, that's in Durham, that little house. That's inside the graveyard. And I doubt that if I was for winter time, the ground would be too hard to dig graves to be frozen. And they'd store all the coffins there until the springtime, when the people that die during the winter. So they had, I mean, things were different there, like they had, but they adapted very well to things. Um, that's a map of the areas that they came from. Uh, you can see there Cape Clear, Baltimore, just few places down there in West Cork. As I said, William Rickson Beecher was a man that was there. He was a landlord, and he was influential there in getting them. Um, the Irish landlords, they moved in the best circles. And they were saying about Lord uh, Lord Ennismore, very friendly with the king of England, and just through him that they got the Canova cast for Cork. Um, he was related to Beecher. He was also his sister was married to Lord Bantry, so there was a lot of they were all connected. Um, the our friend Lord Mountcashel and Lord Mountcashel, they went on the Grand Tour of Europe in 1800, and they had three coachloads. They had their self, his wife, the family, the nursemaids, the chauffeurs, all going. When they were in Europe, they went to Napoleon, they went to Pope. So even though Protestant family was, only the men went to Pope and ladies went to, but they went to Pope. But that will show you the circles that they were moving into, and they had that uh, great influence with the crown. The likes of Lord Listowel, Lord Ennismore, were very, very good for tenants. In fact, later on in the famine, Lord Listowel brought over seed potatoes from England for his tenants. Ballyhooly was the only place that had an increase in population during the famine. But though they were very good to their tenants, they were very, very pro-British, very anti-Irish. You know, they weren't Irish freedom, no, not was England, that really, in fact, that there was one man down there, Thomas Spring Rice, down in Limerick, who wanted to call Ireland West Britain. He wanted to change the name that to give it the name Ireland. But you can see here then this is the North Cork area here, is called, that's where all a lot of the trouble was, and in Limerick a lot of the trouble was. Now there was quite a number of Palatine families went as well in the second lot. Um, you're familiar with the Palatines, and that came from France, Germany in 1709, and there was and they settled mostly they were settled in Limerick mostly, and some things in Limerick, mostly in Limerick, and Keskies, Switzers, Youngs, Millers. There was quite there was I think 8 or 9 families of them went over. In fact, they were the first family to bring Methodism to Canada, because they had been raised with Methodism here in Ireland, but uh, their Palatines settled in, you know, Castlematrix and Rathkeale originally, and then some of them, when the rents went up there, they settled back in near our Patrick, in the Wicked, uh, um, Ballyard and that area, and they're still there today. The names are still there. You find the Meads and the Astons and that, and you have Ruckles then down in that, so they're still there. So I go they took the opportunity to go to go to Canada as well. Um, uh, Now there was a show families in from well, which was some for the second lot. Um, Kingston decided he wanted to get rid of some of his tenants, so he was landlord as well in Ballyporeen, in Tipperary, and in Kilbehenny in Limerick, and and in Kildallery as well, but and Mitchell's on Maidley, and so there were quite a few came from Kildallery and outside happening to that, but from Ballyporeen, Ballyheen, and sort of from Kingston that were the quite lively tenants.
Why?
He wanted to get more money from the uh, with cattle and that. You know, in that era, they had, because after the Napoleonic Wars and the collapse and like uh, whereas corn and grain and that which had been making money when making money, so the tenants were having trouble getting to pay the rent, so he wanted to get rid of that. He wanted to pay for his new castle with that he was building, it eventually broke him eventually, but yeah, it's still another story. Um, so you can see there now um, where they are. Munster there was only one family from Kilkenny and another family from Wicklow. They were the only ones that were outside outside. You know, a couple of families from County Clare, and Kerry. An interesting thing about Listowel, Lord Listowel, that is some was Lord in a small, and there was 12 families went from Listowel, and they all settled in a place called Innismore. And it's the only example of all the people from from the one town or village settling in one place. Then it's forward, and then they are on now all the records of the ships, the original records, are surviving, and they're in the Peterborough Museum and Archives. They have all the information, so you can go in there, make an appointment, go in there, and look through the original documents, see um, the what is in every was in every ship probably within each family, and tremendous source because I mean, most of the records in the days that lie in our court, um, most of the records from my Glanmouth, Kilwood, only date from 1828 or 1830. So these predate a lot of those, like some Richardson, Brad Cormac, Castlines, they would go back to 1790s, you know, and that's, we saw that Sean O'Mara, they brought back, they've traced the births of his children in Rathfarnham, and his brother did go out, but not from Peter Robinson, he went out individually. So the settlement was a tremendous success. The people out there today go out there and you could be in a village in Ireland to some extent. I mean, you there are great mass on Sunday, and it's very Irish. The graveyards we went into, it's the old graveyards, and to be 97% Irish names. So it is, and they're very aware of their origins. Um, and then so there's plenty written about them out there. I produced a book here, which looks at where they came from, because I met several of them over the years, and we, you know, in that era, a lot of it's a civil parish name is down, and they're aware of this. So Senor of Little, which is a parish, the civil parish in Fermoy, you know, Tree Crumpler, Charlie is in Kilgalway. So you're a lot of these places that aren't that well known. So I said it was time that they'd have give them something that they'd be able to look up and some idea. And in the book, I put two photographs on each place of buildings that were there when they left in the 1825 or 23. So that they could look at something that might be a bridge, it might be a church, it might be that their ancestors had been in or looked over in that year. So that's a rough gist of the Robinson settlers. Cost £40,000. It was very successful in that they did very well. They were all very careful, and it was a success in that plenty of people followed an album and helped colonize Canada. Thank you. Want any questions?
Thanks very much. That was very interesting. I'm just wondering, did any of them have any conscience about the fact that they were taking land from the First Nations who were there before then?
David, I'm very well with the First Nations because, as I say, you had one person per 5 square miles in Canada to an empty, you know, land that they had to clear. I mean, it was forested, not particularly forested, but there was tree. Um, uh, Now, so there were no First Nation people dispossessed. In 1823, even the First Nations, they gave them food. They got food for some of them during the winter. And they were able to trap food and got them. Um, the First Nations generally weren't treated with. I mean, over the years, with the English did a treaty with the First Nations in the 18, 1820s. They changed that treaty 23 times, the 23 treaties over the years, each time getting a little bit more for the thing, you know. But anything now that they have over in Canada, any celebration or anything, the First Nations are invited and they're acknowledged, you know, uh, and they were treated abominably afterwards, with the schools and all that, you know. But at the time, there was not hassle because there was plenty of
What kind of farming do they do?
potatoes, um, uh, maple, honey, um, corn, you know, the land. What I've seen is not as good as the land here, but it's level, and they got very very good crops in the early years, and did well, you know, and there was records there of the number of bushels of potatoes and bushels of corn that they produce every year, and you see, family went over there with, you know, they might have had uh, couple of sons that were 16, 17. Once they got to 18, they were able to get land themselves, you know. So they were
Sorry, did they pay the £10 that when they were sending to Australia? Did those people have to pay anything?
for which
You know, when they were, my sister-in-law went of the £10 out to
one
Australia.
ought to do
They did,
completely
it didn't.
completed for free. Now the passengers free. They were paid when they were going out. They got uh, plenty of there was they got plenty of food. There was rations given to them every week when they were out there, and uh, but uh, they had to because they got there in September the first lot, and because in the 12th of September they got there, so it was they had to have somebody to survive the winter, you know. But I know it was a great deal, you know. It was a great deal, you know, you know, the did well, you know. So they just,
So can I confer from your reading of those letters that you sort of see the letters as being a sort of form of marketing? In other words, um, you know,
yes,
I have relatives who come from Montreal, and I know the weather up there is very formidable in the winter.
Yeah.
And to be able to write back and say how favorable everything was, I mean, that was already in November.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, not too far away from being frozen.
well, yeah. And you know, I think that those letters were organised by Peter Robinson or some of his agents because they are, you know, they were very favourable. Now, I'd like to see all the other letters. I was next time I'm over and try and get them and see what I'll see if they are on the same page, shall we say. But they worked in it for thousands, and they were very happy over them because they had the freedom to practice their own religion. There was, you know, there was nothing, and they here they had maybe 2, 5, 10 acres, uh, and the rent could go up at any time. They had their property, and you know, they did well. Some of the families are still there, some
Have you any knowledge of what happened to the Armstrong family from Kilfinnan?
Um, I
What happened eventually?
oh, they're still they did well. That photograph I showed you of the gentleman to be it, he became a captain. I know it was in the army of but he's down as a captain. You know, and that book of uh, Carl Bennett, you know, it was through a number of families. Was if you went over there, I mean, I'm going to a place called Asphodel, a little village called Asphodel, and they had
He stayed in Canada.
oh yeah, the answer.
He stayed at
Oh, sorry, Peter Robinson.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he stayed with them for the first few months, came back, brought over more again. You know, he had doctors arranged for to look after them over and everything, you know. I think I could see there from the thing that he treated them very well. You know what I mean? There was no one had a bad word to say against him. He did the right thing. You know, the second time when the first time he went over with them, the second time he went to New York on a different ship and went up, and they were in a camp for about a month waiting for him to come down. That was the one slippage, should we say. But he the second lap were only a month going over, and because they went earlier, then it was uh, better weather, and he thought it'd be the 2 months that I was just it was a month late getting to it. So um I have I would say I wrote a book there which which gives you the gist of the story, and they said that there's photographs in it then of the uh, two buildings from each place that they came. This was written for the Canadians. Which it gives a gist of the story, and it names all the families and from each area that they came from, and I mean you take um, it's Cameron Churchtown, which is a parish up there. There was nearly 200 people came from there, and there had been a lot of violence there, agrarian violence. I mean, there was, in the 18, there was 1823, there was 200 people bombed the RAC barracks, the police barracks, and that's what I was saying, you know. And of course, they tried to alleviate things and get rid of as many as they could. But that's the way. Got it done, Alan. Years ago, when this place started, the Culture and Landscape Society, it was in here. Wendy Quirk, Declan Chalmers, and Mick O'Connell. Mick O'Connell worked with me, and they got the idea to start the Cork Family History Society. I worked with Mick O'Connell. But Mick O'Connell went to Canada years later in the 1990s. He was over there, and one of the things that he brought up there, he said, they can't bury you in the winter over there. The ground is too hard to keep the bodies. And he just said the same there. And he was in some small town. And he said, there was a fire. So he put his oars below on one time. And the fire brigade arrived. And if there was a second fire brigade came, they couldn't get in because everybody followed the fire brigade. It was a kind of an isolated place. Like, but he was telling me about that over the years when he was over there. Anyway, thank you, Christy, for coming up, and we'll get the briefing book there for in a minute. If anybody wants cover, we come. I have copies of
there for anybody.
They have a hard cover, €40, soft cover, €20.
has list of everybody that went over there as well. So thanks, Christy, for coming tonight, and thanks to everybody for any. Oh yeah, one thing I 2 weeks ago, you listening, a man from Canada, aside from Australia, a historian, and he was going through the records and subtractor, and he was talking about people writing home. How did they find we said the middle of County Cork? How did they post? Was there a postal system? How did they find it?
The postals, the stamps, postal system as such didn't come in until 1859.
Yeah.
And it was an Irishman was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Thomas Spring Rice was Chancellor of the Exchequer that time, and back in but the government would have its sources and would have also been costing more what the system was there, and I feel that that system, as you were saying, that was Spain to get the message back to okay, look at this is like so. I mean, there was a post, but it wasn't as organized as it is as it was later. What's the main
Did they pay delivery or pay to send?
page send? Yeah, yeah.
And I just wondering if you met someone in Canada and you give them so much money to bring it to Ireland. And I got up to Ireland, there's a fellow over there, and he said, who's going to pay him? You know, that fellow to bring it up to
Yeah.
Cork or something.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, like,
Yeah,
anything else anybody would like to say?
Hmm.
So thanks, Christy.
Thanks.
Next week, next Thursday night, we'll have our workshop. And we had one of our members tonight there from Southern.
Yeah,
That's-
next week, just fix it.
It's great, but Trace says positive member here for years. She comes and goes sometimes, so she's here tonight. Thank you. So I don't think there's anything else unless anybody has any other questions. They'd like to.
There was sweet subs from Switzerland that went with the Robinsons.
Yeah.
Two families that have been
Actually, we had an outreach to the Palatine.
That's right.
I think they have a museum down in County Limerick.
was it
Yeah, but
Blackgate, was it there?
I asked, I said, how did you get this net? He said, we applied in Irish. Okay. And he think they were looking for grant, we did it in Irish. And they got no problem getting funding because it was in Irish speaking. You know, the one that speak Irish, but that's how they got voting done. We're going to vote. So if anybody look at funding, sadly, for in Irish, and we get that second. And
Was it yours?
so
Was it just
I think it's just I got to stay with you just to say about people when Tim was recording during the conference, some people were talking, right? One of them, like they don't know out in the north, and you could hear that better than the speaker. That the cameras pick up the background noise more sometimes, and that's why, like, in future, I'm going to say to people when we're having a meeting, don't talk during it because the camera picks it up, and then you can't. It's like a mobile phone as well. But it happened if Tim had to try and take out the background sounds so that you could hear the speaker. So that when you're looking at it, if anybody looks at them online, if you do hear noise, that's what somebody in the room is talking. And they were distance away, like it was people. Anyway, other than that, I think internet's
What's the speaker for next month?
no, we have no speaker for next month yet, which is Christmas. We won't be having a workshop, we'll only be having one meeting. We've had to name of a few people, some people that would give us talks in the new year. One lady was at the conference and she's going to we have a contact coming on, is it? She talked about. So she's done some lot of research about coming on. She said she'd give us a talk. If anybody knows anybody else that would like to give us a talk, let us know. Okay? So because you can get the ones in history groups like genealogy. Some people complain to me after we have to go into genealogy thing on the street. I said, for sure, they're all tied together now, and things like that. So again, thanks for coming out such a bad night, and we got apologies from a lot of people. I won't end them over. Thanks, anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.